The fluorescent light in my garage flickered like a dying heartbeat as I hunched over the busted alternator at 1 in the morning. My hands were black with grease, my back ached from 12 hours of fixing other people's problems, and the last thing I needed was to overhear my wife Sabrina laughing into her phone like some teenage girl with her first crush. "Oh, Evan, you're terrible," she giggled from the kitchen, her voice carrying through the thin walls of our deteriorating suburban home. "Nick? He's still playing mechanic in the garage. Honestly, I don't know why I married a man who thinks WD-40 fixes everything." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My wrench froze mid-turn. 22 years of marriage, and she was talking about me like I was some pathetic joke to whoever this Evan character was. The same woman who used to bring me coffee and kiss my forehead when I worked late on my inventions now sounded like she wished I'd disappear entirely. "The patent thing?" Sabrina continued, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper. "It's going nowhere. Nick's brilliant with his hands, but he has zero business sense. Zero. Sometimes I think I'd be better off without the dead weight." Dead weight. That's what 22 years of marriage had earned me in her eyes. I set down the wrench carefully, wiped my hands on an old rag, and crept closer to the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. Through the crack, I could see Sabrina pacing in her silk pajamas, the ones I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. She looked beautiful as always, her auburn hair catching the kitchen light, but her expression was cold, calculating. I know, she said into the phone. "But divorce is messy, and Nick's not completely stupid. He'd fight for half of everything, including the house. No, it's better to wait until his little patent dreams crash and burn completely. Then I'll have grounds for irreconcilable differences, maybe even get him declared mentally unstable. You should see how obsessed he gets with those stupid sketches." My blood turned to ice water. Those stupid sketches represented 5 years of work, 5 years of developing a revolutionary hydraulic system that could change everything for small manufacturing companies. The same sketches she used to praise, telling me how proud she was of my innovation. "Evan, you're so understanding," she cooed. "Most men wouldn't put up with a woman whose husband is such a, well, let's call it a fixer-upper project. But you see my potential, don't you?" Evan. I'd heard that name before. Evan Morrison, her new boss at TechFlow Solutions, the guy who'd been promoting her rapidly through the ranks. The same guy she'd been working late with, going to conferences with, having dinner meetings with. It all clicked into place like a perfectly machined part. "I should go," Sabrina said. "He might come in soon, and the last thing I need is him getting suspicious. See you tomorrow at the office, handsome." I heard her footsteps heading toward the stairs and quickly returned to the alternator, forcing my hands to stay steady even though my mind was racing. When she poked her head into the garage 5 minutes later, I was the picture of the oblivious husband. "Still working, honey?" she asked, her voice saccharine sweet now. "You should get some sleep." I looked up at her. This woman I'd loved since college, this woman who'd stood beside me through my father's death, my job losses, my struggles to get the patent approved. Now she was planning my destruction while pretending to care about my sleep schedule. "Just finishing up," I said, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "You go ahead. I'll be up soon." She smiled that perfect smile that used to make my heart skip and disappeared back into the house. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close, then pulled out my phone and started making notes. If Sabrina wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent my entire adult life fixing things that were broken. Now it was time to fix my marriage by breaking the people who were destroying it. The alternator could wait. I had more important work to do. 3 days of careful observation taught me more about my wife than 22 years of marriage had. Sabrina left for work 30 minutes earlier than usual, came home 2 hours later, and spent most evenings texting someone who made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in years. I started my investigation the way I approached any complex mechanical problem, methodically, systematically, and with attention to detail. While Sabrina showered Thursday morning, I checked her phone. The password was still our anniversary date, which felt like a cruel joke. The text messages between Sabrina and Evan Morrison painted a picture that made my stomach turn. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. More importantly, they were planning my destruction. Evan. The patent application is still pending? Perfect. Once it gets rejected, Sabrina can claim financial stress as grounds for divorce. Sabrina. Nick's been so obsessed with it lately. Stays up all night working on modifications. I told my lawyer he's becoming mentally unstable. Evan. Brilliant. By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to keep his tools, let alone half the house. Sabrina. I feel a little guilty sometimes. He's not a bad man, just limited. Evan. Limited men don't deserve unlimited women. You're destined for bigger things, baby. I screenshotted everything, my hands shaking with rage. They were planning to steal my life's work, my home, my reputation, and probably my sanity in the process. Sabrina, the woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, was systematically documenting my behavior to use against me in court. But the worst part was discovering how long this had been going on. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of her coming home and kissing me hello while planning my downfall. 8 months of me working myself to exhaustion while she laughed about it with her lover. I needed more evidence, and I knew exactly where to get it. Friday afternoon, I called in a favor from my old friend Benny Rodriguez, who ran a private investigation service on the side of his boxing gym. Benny and I had known each other since high school, and he owed me for the time I'd rebuilt his truck engine for free. You sure about this, Nick? Benny asked as we sat in his cluttered office above the gym. The sound of heavy bags being pounded echoed from below, a rhythmic reminder that some problems required physical solutions. Once you see proof, there's no going back to pretending everything's fine. Everything's not fine, I said. She's been planning to destroy me for months. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Benny nodded slowly. He was a big man, 6'4" and built like a linebacker, but his eyes held the kind of intelligence that most people missed. I can have photos by Monday, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, the whole package. But Nick, what are you planning to do with this information? That was the question, wasn't it? The old Nick would have confronted Sabrina directly, would have tried to save the marriage through counseling and communication. But the old Nick hadn't known that his wife considered him dead weight, that she was actively sabotaging his dreams while planning to have him declared mentally unstable. I'm going to fix the problem, I said finally. Benny studied my face for a long moment. You know, my grandfather used to say that revenge is a dish best served cold. But he also said that sometimes when someone's trying to bury you, the only solution is to dig their grave first. Smart man, your grandfather. He was. He also said that if you're going to go to war, you better make sure you win. Benny leaned forward. Because if you come at the queen, you best not miss. I left the gym with a plan forming in my mind. Sabrina and Evan thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. They were about to discover that I'd been playing chess all along. I'd just been letting them think they were winning. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I made Sabrina breakfast in bed. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice, the works. She looked surprised but pleased, probably thinking her devoted husband was back to his normal, oblivious self. This is wonderful, honey, she said, cutting into the pancakes. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to treat my wife like the queen she is? I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I've been so focused on work lately I forgot to appreciate what I have right here. She actually blushed. Nick, you're so sweet. I'm sorry if I've been distant lately. Work has been incredibly stressful. I'm sure it has, I said, thinking about her text messages. "This new boss of yours, Evan, he seems to really value your contributions." "He does," she said quickly, then caught herself. "I mean, yes, he's very supportive of the team. Maybe I should meet him sometime. Take him out for a beer, thank him for recognizing your talents." The color drained from Sabrina's face. "Oh, that's not necessary. He's very busy, very private, doesn't really socialize with employees' families." "Of course not," I said, standing up. "Well, I'll let you enjoy your breakfast. I have some work to do in the garage." As I headed downstairs, I heard her phone buzz. By the time I reached the garage, she was already texting frantically. I didn't need to see the messages to know she was warning Evan that her husband was getting suspicious. Let them worry. Let them scramble to cover their tracks and adjust their plans. While they were busy reacting to my moves, I was already 3 steps ahead, planning their complete destruction. The alternator sat on my workbench, still waiting to be fixed. I picked up my wrench and got back to work. After all, I had a reputation to maintain as a man who fixed things, and I was about to fix this situation permanently. Monday morning brought Benny's evidence package, and it was even worse than I'd imagined. High-resolution photos of Sabrina and Evan at the Riverside Hotel, receipts for romantic dinners, even a recording of them discussing their plans for my patent application. The beautiful part, Evan's voice crackled through Benny's recording device, is that Nick has no idea how the business world really works. He thinks innovation equals success. He doesn't understand that success requires connections, leverage, and the willingness to eliminate obstacles. "You make it sound so ruthless," Sabrina laughed. "But I suppose you're right. Nick's too honest for his own good. He actually believes people will treat him fairly if he treats them fairly." "Exactly. It's almost sad, really. But his naivety is our opportunity. Once his patent gets rejected, and I'm making sure it does through my contacts at the patent office, he'll be devastated. That's when you file for divorce, claim he's become unstable, and we can start our life together without any dead weight." I listened to the recording 3 times, each playback hardening my resolve. They weren't just betraying me, they were actively sabotaging my work through Evan's connections. The patent I'd poured my heart into for 5 years wasn't being rejected on its merits. It was being killed by corruption and greed. That evening, I made my first move. I waited until Sabrina left for her late meeting with Evan, then drove to the Riverside Hotel. Benny had provided their usual room number, and hotel security was surprisingly lax for a place that charged $300 a night. Evan's silver Tesla was parked in the VIP section, gleaming under the parking lot lights like a symbol of everything wrong with the world. I walked around it slowly, admiring the craftsmanship while planning its destruction. The car probably cost more than I made in 2 years, bought with money earned by crushing people like me. I didn't key the paint or slash the tires. That would have been crude, obvious, the kind of thing an unstable husband might do. Instead, I opened my toolbox and went to work with precision and artistry. 20 minutes later, Evan's Tesla looked perfect from the outside. But the alternator belt was loosened just enough to slip under stress. The brake fluid had been diluted with water, and the air pressure in all 4 tires had been reduced to exactly 15 psi, enough to drive, but not enough to handle sudden stops or turns safely. As I packed up my tools, I noticed a familiar figure watching from across the parking lot. Monica Chen, Sabrina's best friend and fellow gossip enthusiast, was sitting in her Honda Civic with a telephoto lens camera. She'd obviously been documenting the affair, probably planning to sell the information to the highest bidder or use it for her own purposes. Monica and I had never liked each other. She'd always treated me like I wasn't good enough for Sabrina, making snide comments about my blue-collar job and lack of social ambitions. Now she was playing photographer for my wife's betrayal, probably enjoying every moment of my humiliation. I walked over to her car and tapped on the window. She jumped like she'd been electrocuted, fumbling to hide the camera. "Evening, Monica," I said as she reluctantly rolled down the window. Funny meeting you here. Nick, I wasn't. She was flustered, caught red-handed in her surveillance operation. Taking pictures of my wife with her boss? I asked conversationally. Yeah, I figured that out. Question is, what are you planning to do with those photos? Monica's face went through several expressions before settling on defiant. Someone needs to document what's happening. Sabrina deserves better than being trapped in a marriage with someone who can't provide for her properly. Interesting perspective, I said. Tell me, does your husband Tom know you're out here playing private investigator? Or does he think you're at book club tonight? Her face went pale. Tom Chen was a straight-laced accountant who believed in traditional values and marital loyalty. He'd be devastated to learn that his wife was not only enabling an affair, but actively documenting it. You wouldn't, Monica whispered. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth? I thought that's what we were all about here tonight. I leaned closer to her window. But here's the thing, Monica. I'm not the pathetic, clueless husband you all think I am. I'm a man who fixes problems, and right now, you're becoming a problem. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of her car in the hotel parking lot, with the timestamp clearly visible. This is evidence that you were here, participating in documenting my wife's affair. In a divorce proceeding, this could be very interesting. Conspiracy to commit adultery, invasion of privacy, maybe even blackmail depending on what you plan to do with those photos. Monica's hands were shaking now. What do you want? I want you to go home to your husband and think very carefully about which side of this situation you want to be on, I said. Because when this all comes out, and it will come out, you're going to have to explain your role in it. You can be the friend who tried to help, or you can be the accomplice who enabled the destruction of a marriage. Your choice. I walked back to my truck, leaving Monica sitting in her car with her mouth hanging open. In my rearview mirror, I watched her drive away, probably heading home to delete photos and figure out how to distance herself from the mess she'd helped create. Phase 1 was complete. Evan's car would break down spectacularly within the next few days. Monica was neutralized as a threat, and I had documented evidence of the entire conspiracy. But this was just the beginning. Sabrina and Evan had spent months planning my destruction. Now it was time for them to discover what happened when you tried to bury a man who understood how things really worked. They thought they were playing chess while I played checkers. They were about to learn that I'd been playing three-dimensional chess all along. Evan's Tesla broke down spectacularly on Tuesday morning, right in the middle of downtown traffic during rush hour. According to the news report I watched with barely concealed satisfaction, the luxury vehicle had suffered multiple simultaneous mechanical failures, leaving its owner stranded and causing a 2-hour traffic jam. Sabrina came home that evening in a foul mood, slamming doors and muttering about bad luck and terrible timing. She didn't mention Evan's car troubles directly, but her constant phone checking and frustrated sighs told me everything I needed to know. Rough day at work? I asked innocently, looking up from the patent application I was revising at the kitchen table. You could say that, she snapped. Sometimes it feels like the universe is conspiring against people who are just trying to get ahead in life. That's terrible, I said, returning to my paperwork. But you know what they say. When bad things happen to good people, it usually means someone's not as good as they pretend to be. She shot me a sharp look, but I kept my expression neutral, focused on my work. Let her wonder if I knew something or if I was just making conversation. Uncertainty was a powerful weapon, and I intended to use it liberally. Wednesday brought phase 2 of my plan. I'd spent months documenting every conversation with Sabrina about my patent, every email exchange with the patent office, every technical detail of my hydraulic system. What Sabrina and Evan didn't know was that I'd been building a case for patent interference and corporate espionage. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, no relation to Evan, thankfully, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in intellectual property law. She'd helped me navigate the patent application process, and more importantly, she had connections throughout the legal community. "This is serious, Nick," Janet said, reviewing the evidence I'd brought her. "If you can prove that Evan Morrison used his corporate connections to interfere with your patent application, we're talking about federal crimes, corporate espionage, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering if we can tie it to a pattern of behavior." "What about Sabrina's involvement?" I asked. Janet's expression hardened. "Spousal privilege won't protect her if she was actively participating in the conspiracy. The text messages you've shown me indicate she was a willing participant, not just an unfaithful wife. She could face criminal charges alongside Morrison." "I don't want to destroy her," I said carefully. "I just want to protect myself and my work." "Nick, I've known you for 3 years, and you're one of the most decent men I've ever met. But these people aren't playing fair, and if you don't fight back with everything you have, they're going to bury you." Janet leaned forward. "The question is, how far are you willing to go to protect yourself?" That was the question, wasn't it? The old Nick would have tried to salvage his marriage, would have confronted Sabrina and begged her to reconsider. But the old Nick hadn't known that his wife was actively working to destroy his life's work while planning to have him declared mentally unstable. "As far as necessary," I said finally. Janet nodded. "Then we're going to war. But remember, Nick, once we start this process, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over, your wife will probably face criminal charges, and your life will never be the same." "My marriage is already over," I said. "Sabrina killed it 8 months ago. I'm just filing the death certificate." That evening, I implemented Phase 3. I'd learned from Benny that the best way to destroy someone wasn't through direct confrontation. It was through their own network, their own friends and allies turning against them. I started with Monica Chen. Her husband Tom worked at the same accounting firm that handled TechFlow Solutions books. A few carefully placed questions during our chance encounter at the grocery store revealed that Tom had been noticing irregularities in certain expense accounts, specifically charges for hotels and restaurants that seemed excessive for legitimate business purposes. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Tom said, glancing around nervously as we stood in the cereal aisle. "But there's been talk at the office about Morrison's expense reports. He's been billing the company for a lot of personal entertainment, and some of the receipts don't add up." "That's interesting," I said, pretending to study a box of cornflakes. "Monica mentioned that Sabrina's been working a lot of late nights with Morrison. I hope the company isn't being overcharged for legitimate business meetings." Tom's face went pale. "Late nights?" "Monica said Sabrina was working on a special project, but she didn't mention Morrison specifically." I could see the wheels turning in Tom's mind. He was an accountant, trained to spot discrepancies and connect dots. It wouldn't take him long to realize that his wife had been lying about her evening activities, and that the expense account irregularities might be connected to something more personal than business fraud. "I'm probably overthinking it," I said casually. "You know how paranoid I get sometimes. Sabrina says I worry too much about her work relationships." No, you're right to be concerned," Tom said quickly. "Maybe I should look into those expense reports more carefully. For the company's sake, of course." "Of course," I agreed. "Just looking out for everyone's best interests." I left Tom standing in the cereal aisle with a troubled expression, knowing that he'd go home and start asking Monica difficult questions about her recent activities. Monica would either have to confess her role in documenting the affair, or lie to her husband and risk getting caught later when the truth inevitably came out. Either way, Sabrina was about to lose her most valuable ally. Phase 4 would begin tomorrow, and it would be the most dangerous part of my plan. I was going to confront Evan Morrison directly, not as the cuckolded husband seeking revenge, but as a businessman protecting his intellectual property. It was time for Mr. Morrison to learn that some obstacles fought back. Thursday morning, I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to my father's funeral 3 years ago, and drove to TechFlow Solutions' downtown headquarters. The building was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate visitors and remind them that they were entering a world of power and money where ordinary people like me didn't belong. But I wasn't ordinary people anymore. I was a man with evidence, legal representation, and nothing left to lose. Evan Morrison's corner office was on the 15th floor, with a view of the river and enough square footage to house a small family. His secretary, a nervous young woman named Ashley, tried to tell me that Mr. Morrison was in meetings all day and couldn't see anyone without an appointment. "Tell him Nick Patterson is here about the hydraulic patent application," I said, settling into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. "I think he'll make time." 5 minutes later, Ashley returned with a forced smile. "Mr. Morrison will see you now." Evan Morrison was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, expensively dressed, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. He stood up as I entered his office, extending a hand as if we were old friends meeting for lunch. "Nick, great to finally meet you. Sabrina talks about you all the time." "I'm sure she does," I thought, but I shook his hand and smiled back. "All good things, I hope." "Of course. She's very proud of your work. Please, sit down. Can I get you coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thanks." I sat in the chair across from his massive desk, noting the expensive artwork on the walls and the collection of awards celebrating his business achievements. "I wanted to talk to you about my patent application." Evan's smile flickered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not sure how I can help with that. Patent applications are handled by federal agencies, not private companies." "True," I said, pulling out a folder from my briefcase. "But private companies can influence those agencies through connections and relationships. They can also steal proprietary information and use it to develop competing products." The smile disappeared entirely. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Nick, but I think there might be some misunderstanding here." "No misunderstanding," I said, opening the folder and spreading photographs across his desk. "These are pictures of you and my wife at the Riverside Hotel over the past 3 months. These are copies of text messages discussing your plans to have my patent application rejected. And this is a recording of you explaining how you intended to eliminate me as an obstacle to your relationship." Evan's face went white as he stared at the evidence. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter? The question is what you're going to do about it." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling very relaxed. "You see, Evan, you made a critical error. You assumed I was just some blue-collar idiot who wouldn't fight back. But I've spent my entire adult life solving complex problems, and right now, you're a problem that needs solving." "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want my patent application processed fairly, without interference from you or your connections. I want a written confession of your attempts to sabotage my work, and I want you to end your relationship with my wife immediately." Evan laughed, but it sounded forced. "You can't be serious. Even if I did what you're claiming, which I'm not admitting, you can't prove corporate espionage based on some photos and recordings that might not even be admissible in court." "You're right," I said, standing up and collecting the photographs. "I probably can't prove corporate espionage beyond a reasonable doubt, but I don't need to prove it in criminal court. I just need to create reasonable suspicion for your company's board of directors." I pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the first. "These are copies of your expense reports for the past year, cross-referenced with hotel receipts and restaurant bills. Your company has been paying for your affair with my wife to the tune of about $50,000 in fraudulent expense claims." Evan's hands were shaking now as he flipped through the documents. "How did you get access to confidential financial records? Let's just say that accountants talk to each other, especially when they're concerned about potential fraud." I sat back down, enjoying the look of panic in his eyes. Tom Chen is very thorough when he's investigating discrepancies. He's also very unhappy to discover that his wife was helping document your affair while lying to him about her own activities. "This is blackmail," Evan said weakly. No, this is business. You taught me that success requires connections, leverage, and the willingness to eliminate obstacles. I'm just applying your lessons. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Evan. You're going to call your contacts at the patent office and make sure my application gets fair consideration. You're going to write a detailed confession of your attempts to interfere with my work, and you're going to transfer $50,000 to my account as compensation for the emotional distress you've caused my family. And if I refuse? Then copies of all this evidence go to your board of directors, the FBI's Corporate Crimes Division, and every major newspaper in the state. Your career will be over, you'll face federal charges, and you'll spend the next 5 years in prison explaining to your cellmates how you got caught stealing patents and embezzling company funds. Evan stared at me for a long moment, probably calculating his options and realizing he didn't have any good ones. You're not the man Sabrina described. No, I'm not. Sabrina fell in love with a naive idealist who believed in fairness and honesty, but you and she killed that man over the past 8 months. What you're dealing with now is what's left after you strip away everything decent and trusting. I stood up again. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires and the evidence goes public. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Evan? If you're thinking about warning Sabrina or trying to coordinate your stories, you should know that I have surveillance on both of you. Any attempt to obstruct justice or tamper with evidence will just add to the charges you're already facing. I left him sitting in his expensive chair, staring at the evidence of his own destruction. The elevator ride down felt like a victory lap. 15 floors of satisfaction as I descended from his world of power and corruption, back to ground level, where honest work and genuine consequences still mattered. Phase 5 would begin tonight, and it would be the most difficult part of my plan. It was time to confront Sabrina directly, to give her one last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But I already knew what her choice would be. She'd made it 8 months ago when she decided I was dead weight. Now she was about to discover what happened when dead weight came back to life. Sabrina was waiting for me when I got home Thursday evening, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and an expression I'd never seen before. It was the look of someone who'd finally been caught and was trying to decide between confession and defiance. "We need to talk," she said as I hung up my coat. "Yes, we do." I sat down across from her, noting that she'd only poured 1 glass of wine. Even now, she wasn't offering to share. "How was your day at work?" "Don't." Her voice was sharp, cutting. "Don't pretend you don't know. Evan called me after your little meeting. He told me about your threats, your evidence, your demands." "Threats?" I asked mildly. "I prefer to think of them as business negotiations. Evan taught me that success requires leverage, so I found some leverage." Sabrina's laugh was bitter. "You think you're so clever, don't you? The wronged husband finally fighting back, but you have no idea what you've done. I've protected my life's work from theft and sabotage. I've exposed a conspiracy to defraud the patent office, and I've documented evidence of corporate embezzlement." I leaned back in my chair. "What exactly do you think I've done wrong?" "You've destroyed everything!" She slammed her wine glass down, sloshing red liquid across the table. "Do you know what happens to me when this comes out? I lose my job, my reputation, my future, everything I've worked for, gone because you couldn't just accept that our marriage was over." "Our marriage was over 8 months ago, Sabrina. You killed it when you decided I was dead weight and started planning my destruction. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle that would let her salvage something from the disaster. "It doesn't have to be like this, Nick. We could work something out, divide everything fairly, part as friends. Friends don't sabotage each other's patents. Friends don't plan to have each other declared mentally unstable. Friends don't steal $50,000 in company funds to finance their affairs." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. But I'm willing to listen. Tell me why I should show you mercy after what you've done." Sabrina's composure cracked, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 22 years ago, vulnerable and scared. "Because I loved you once. Because we had good years together. Because destroying me won't bring back what we had." "You're right," I said softly. "Destroying you won't bring back our marriage, but it will prevent you from destroying anyone else the way you tried to destroy me." "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "It started as just excitement, something new and different. Evan made me feel important, valuable in ways I hadn't felt in years. The plan to sabotage your patent, that was his idea. I just went along with it because I thought it would make the divorce easier." "Easier for who? You were planning to have me declared mentally unstable, Sabrina. You were going to take everything I've worked for and leave me with nothing but a reputation as a crazy man who couldn't handle his wife's success." Tears were streaming down her face now. I know it was wrong, but I felt trapped, Nick. Trapped in a life that wasn't going anywhere, married to a man who was brilliant but couldn't translate that brilliance into success. Evan offered me a different life, a better life. So you decided to destroy my life to get it. "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. "God help me. Yes." We sat in silence for several minutes, 22 years of marriage reduced to this moment of brutal honesty. Finally, Sabrina looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you have a choice," I said. "You can cooperate with the investigation, testify against Evan, and hope the prosecutors show you mercy because you were manipulated by someone in a position of power. Or you can try to fight this and face the full consequences of your actions." "And our marriage?" "Our marriage ended 8 months ago. We're just filing the paperwork now." Sabrina nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable. Will you try to destroy me completely? Take everything out of spite?" I thought about that question for a long time, studying the face of the woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams for more than 2 decades. The woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral and celebrated with me when I got my first patent. The woman who'd called me dead weight and planned my destruction. "I'm not interested in revenge, Sabrina. I'm interested in justice. You'll face the consequences of your choices, but I won't try to make them worse than they have to be." I stood up and walked toward the stairs. "I'll be staying in the guest room from now on. I think it's best if we minimize contact until the legal proceedings are finished." "Nick?" she called as I reached the doorway. "Yes?" "I really did love you once." "I know," I said without turning around. "That's what makes this so tragic." I climbed the stairs to the guest room, leaving Sabrina alone with her wine and her regrets. Through the thin walls I could hear her crying, but I felt nothing but emptiness. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to save their marriage despite everything, was gone. In his place was someone harder, colder, more practical. Someone who understood that some things couldn't be fixed, only replaced. Friday morning brought Evan's surrender. A courier delivered an envelope containing his written confession, a cashier's check for $50,000, and a letter of resignation from TechFlow Solutions. By noon, my lawyer had confirmed that my patent application was back on track for approval. Monica Chen filed for divorce from her husband that afternoon, unable to face his questions about her role in documenting the affair. The gossip network that had once buzzed with speculation about my marriage now focused on the spectacular collapse of the Morrison-Patterson conspiracy. Within a week, the story had spread throughout our small city's business community. Evan Morrison, the rising star of TechFlow Solutions, had been exposed as an embezzler and corporate saboteur. Sabrina Patterson, once considered one of the company's most promising managers, was facing federal charges for conspiracy and fraud. And Nick Patterson, the blue-collar inventor everyone had dismissed as dead weight, had outmaneuvered them all. Epilogue. The patent. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Federal Patent Office in Washington, D.C., holding the official approval for my hydraulic system design. The same patent that Sabrina and Evan had tried to sabotage was now protected by federal law, and 3 different manufacturing companies were bidding for exclusive licensing rights. The highest bid was for $2.3 million. I thought about calling Sabrina to share the news, but she was in federal prison serving an 18-month sentence for conspiracy and fraud. Evan had received 5 years for corporate espionage and embezzlement. Monica was working as a cashier at a grocery store, her accounting career destroyed by her association with the scandal. Their choices had consequences, just like mine did. The old Nick would have felt guilty about their fates, would have wondered if he could have handled the situation differently. But the old Nick was gone, replaced by someone who understood that fairness was something you fought for, not something you waited to receive. I drove home to my empty house. Sabrina's half had been sold to pay her legal fees, and opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for this moment. As I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and sketches that represented my life's work, I raised a toast to the man I used to be. "Thanks for being naive enough to trust people," I said to the empty air. "And thanks for being smart enough to document everything." The fluorescent light above my workbench flickered, just like it had that night 6 months ago when I'd overheard Sabrina planning my destruction. But now the light seemed brighter, more steady. Everything in my workshop was exactly where it belonged, including me. I had work to do, patents to develop, problems to solve, a future to build. And this time, I'd be building it with people who understood that success meant lifting others up, not tearing them down. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my lawyer with news about the licensing negotiations. "Nick," Janet's voice was excited. "The final bid came in. Patterson Hydraulic Systems is about to make you a very wealthy man." Patterson Hydraulic Systems. I liked the sound of that. "How wealthy?" I asked. $3.7 million for exclusive licensing rights plus royalties on every unit sold. Nick, you did it. You beat them all. I looked around my garage workshop, at the tools that had built my fortune and the sketches that had secured my future. Sabrina had been wrong about one thing. I did understand how the business world worked. I just chose to work within it honestly until honesty was no longer an option. "Thanks, Janet. I couldn't have done this without you." "You did the hard part, Nick. You gathered the evidence, built the case, and had the courage to fight back when they tried to destroy you. I just filed the paperwork." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet garage for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I'd been a man whose wife considered him dead weight. Now, I was a millionaire inventor with a bright future and hard-earned wisdom about the nature of loyalty and betrayal. The alternator I'd been fixing that first night still sat on my workbench, finally repaired and ready to be installed. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hands, appreciating the precision of its construction and the elegance of its design. Some things could be fixed. Others had to be replaced entirely. I had learned the difference, and that knowledge had made all the difference.